Follow along for this 3-step rehab process to get rid of your turf toe. Dr. Michael out here from Team Rehab, and I have Julie with me.
Hi, I'm Julia Glanz, a registered dietitian, and excited to be here with you.
And we're going to talk all about turf toe. So before we get into the rehab, we're briefly going to explain where turf toe comes from and kind of the mechanism of injury. Turf toe injury typically describes injury to the plantar surface of the first MTP joint, which is basically your big toe. There's a capsule and a ton of ligaments there that when somebody, say we're playing football or soccer, and say I go and tackle Julia and she's standing up a little bit, so go into a split stance lunge position. Say I fall into her leg and then I smash her big toe and it goes into this massive end range extension. That's typically how that injury happens. So we're going to divide up rehab in 3 separate phases, starting with phase 1. So phase 1 of turf toe rehab, no different than any other injury you may have. It's all about calming stuff down. So we talked about the pathomechanics of the injury and the mechanism of injury. When that big toe goes into end range extension, that's when we're putting a lot of stress on those tissues. So typically in the first week or two, we want to kind of avoid putting excessive stress on there. Now, it doesn't mean completely rest and rice. Talk about it over here. You can go to that blog article and read about rice and actually icing injuries. But we may want to limit the amount of stress on there. So the biggest aggravating factor typically is walking. So as Julia goes into a walk, just any walk, what we'll see is that that big toe goes into a good amount of extension, 50, 60, even 70 degrees for most people. So when you're walking, if Julia comes back over here, she may have to take just smaller steps. So if we just take a little bit smaller steps like this, the toe is not going into as much extension. And again, this is a compensatory strategy, but it is something that we want to initiate very early on to limit the amount of loads that we put on that big toe. Now say Julia wants to keep training, she wants to do exercises. Maybe let's keep everything flat-footed. So double leg squats, if we squat right now, go ahead and go for a squat. That toe is staying very neutral. I'll say that's a great thing. We can load that squat up, the deadlift, whatever it is. But say we go into a split stance lunge or something like that, that may be something where we're like, let's ease off on that for a little bit, at least during this first phase. So stick to exercises where you can keep a flat foot. And I'm sure if you guys have been following us for a while, there are plenty of exercises that you can do with a flat foot. All right, so phase 2 of your turf toe rehab. In phase 2, we actually want to start putting stresses back onto those injured. So we want to start working into that extension. Now, doing that is going to be a little bit painful. So as Julie pushes back here, and so we're going to start up there. So she right now maybe has 10% of her weight on that toe. As she puts 20, she may be like, ooh, I'm starting to feel a little bit of discomfort right now. That's totally normal and totally okay. Say your baseline levels of discomfort are like a 2 out of 10. I'll say, Julie, why don't you push to about a 4 out of 10? Let's hold it there for 10, 15 seconds or so, and then relax. And we can go through cycles of that where we're just getting the tissues used to that amount of load through that big toe joint. Once that gets a little bit less irritable, we can do things like calf raises. So if you want to come over here to hang on to something for balance, calf raises, yes, they're strengthening up all these things in the bottom side of our foot as well as in the calf, but we're actually also going through a relatively decent amount of first toe extension. So this is something that we can begin to incorporate again in phase 2. Phase 2, the name of the game is trying to go into some sort of extension at the big toe under whatever loads that you can tolerate. And again, discomfort with this is expected and a little bit normal. So don't be alarmed if you have a little bit of discomfort in the big toe at this time. So phase 3, it's basically a continuation of phase 2. We're just going to start loading that sucker up even more. So right now I have Julia doing single limb heel raises. So it's a lot more weight, basically her whole body weight on one limb. Once that gets a little bit less irritable, or say she's able to knock out a ton of these, we can start actually adding in some sort of hops, some sort of quick stretches. So we can go here hanging onto the wall. We can start with 2 feet. And again, if it's our first time doing this, I expect her to be like, hey, this doesn't feel the greatest. I'm like, okay, let's talk about it. How does it feel the next day? Feels fine. Let's keep doing more of it until she gets accustomed to that. And then we can even start going into one leg, the same exact concept. Now, the big thing that we avoided early on was a split stance lunge. Let's go ahead and get into a split stance lunge position. So typically when we teach a split stance lunge, we're typically trying to load the front leg. But for turf toe, what we're going to try to do is we're actually going to load the back leg. So in a traditional lunge, I'll just have you go up and down. We're typically, maybe it's even, maybe it's 60-40, 70-30. If we're actually trying to load this big toe, I might say, Julia, it's going to feel really weird because I know you're used to doing these the right way. Let's shift back a little bit onto your back toe. So let's go maybe 60-40 without actually getting wider. So let's keep there we go. So now let's put 60% of the weight on this back leg, 40% on this leg. So now we're really driving through the back leg and we're loading up that joint even more than before. And you'll probably feel a pretty big stretch depending on how tight you are, either in the big toe or kind of underneath on the bottom side as well, kind of into the plantar fascia. So again, you're in control of how much stretch you want to put through that entire complex depending on how much weight you push back or forward. And again, we can hold certain positions. We could even load it up. We can have this with dumbbells too if we really wanted to actually load it up even more. But again, try to simplify your rehab. Turf toe, we say that the mechanism of injury is going into hyperextension at the big toe. So initially, let's back off a little bit. Let's avoid it, but let's keep training. Let's train arms, let's train abs, let's train squat, let's train deadlifts. Let's do everything that we can where the big toe is not going into extension. As it gets less irritable, we can start loading up into those extended positions with whatever weight you're comfortable with. And as you get more and more comfortable, you should feel like you're basically just training again and actually trying to push into that big toe extension. All right, so hopefully if you've been following along with this video, you understand a little bit more about how to rehab your turf toe. And if you've been doing the exercises that Julia has been demonstrating, hopefully it's feeling a lot better by now, especially if you've been doing this over and over and over again. So if you like this video, please like this video, please subscribe to our channel and give us a comment, and also give Julia some love too on her Instagram. With that, signing off. Thank you.